All right, so everybody, thanks so much for always listening to our show. We greatly appreciate this. We have a returning guest, Dr. Robert Chandler. He's worked with the LA Dodgers, he's worked with the Lakers in the past, he's worked with the Clippers, every team in California, to honestly be exact. He's done it and worked with professional baseball, football, basketball, and soccer players as far as that goes and helping them recover and stay in good health. He's been really influential as far as what's going on with, and I got to be careful how we say this, with the jabs, and doing a lot of research with those Pfizer documents that came out. I do hope people research this and really go in depth and to looking into the Pfizer documents. You can buy them on Amazon, excuse me. You can also go to the website. We'll put that in the description box as well. Dr. Chandler, thanks so much for always coming on. It's always a pleasure to see your face, and you're always doing amazing work to help people like you and I hopefully recover and get more information out about this crap that went on for the past 4 years and more.
It's an amazing story when you look back on it. It's going to be something that was going to be in the history books, and it's going to be studied for a long, long time. It's quite an event.
Doc, I want to kind of just go into what went on back in 2021 and beyond with the jabs. If we could go a little bit deep into this for people that haven't heard us speak before, maybe we could even start off with you telling the people listening and watching this what you've done as far as with those Pfizer documents and going very deep into what was
Yeah.
in the jab, you along with many other physicians that are really trying to find answers about what's really in these pharmaceutical medications, I guess we want to call it that, or whatever the hell they're calling it.
Yeah, it's a concoction. It's a very complex product. It has a lot of things in it that can cause problems of different nature, and that's one of the things you have to keep in mind. And the products weren't uniform throughout the delivery cycle, and we can go into that. All of the different products that precursors to what was actually administered to the 5 billion people, and that's a huge story. So let's get back to the beginning. And what got me interested was I had a pretty severe reaction. I was a trauma surgeon. I was a sports medicine surgeon. Uh, Never really gave vaccines a thought or consideration, and done some exotic travel. And I've got every vaccine I could find. I have. So I wasn't. It was just irrelevant. I assumed that the doctors and the researchers had done a good job in developing these products as being safe and effective. That's the language that they use. So I had a terrible reaction, and I thought maybe you should look into this a little bit. And when Aaron Series law firm got the release of the Pfizer confidential records, at least a third of them. We thought they were all the 450,000 pages, but there's another million pages coming. So Aaron Siri had to go back to the judge in Texas, the district judge, and get him to force the FDA, it's really the FDA, not Pfizer, to release the rest of the documents. And they're supposed to be released by June. So we've got a whole nother batch of things to look at. So when the first batch came out, and the crowdsourced review was announced on Steve Bannon's program, I got interested, and I thought this would be a way to try to deal with that volume of work. Have a number of people with different specialty interests, whether they're physicians or researchers or healthcare professionals of various sorts, would be the way to do it. My own personal approach was to be like a person that does a review of the products, meaning somebody associated with the FDA or the CDC, that I would look at it from the laboratory to the animal studies, to the clinical studies, to the pharmacovigilance and beyond. And I started with the animal studies. And after reading a few of them, I knew this was going to be a long project because I identified 16 areas of deficiencies in the animal studies. And that's what set the hook.
And I kind of want to even go deeper into this just to kind of go into the SV40. A lot of people have been talking about this and how the SV40 kind of got started back with the polio vaccine and how that was in that. And to most people that were alive in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, and the 80s that got that polio vaccine, I would say maybe the 50s through the 70s specifically, they have that SV40 in that vaccine. And, it's in their body, and whatever happens, happens. That's God's will. And now we go to what happened with the COVID jab. And for at least Pfizer, the SV40 has been proven that it's in that jab, that it is in the jab. And it's very interesting for the viewer and the listener to hear this from you, Dr. Chandler, because a lot of people, such as myself, and even I'm sure you think about this as well, what are they hiding? Why do they have to wait 70 some odd years to bring all this information out? Why was there two vaccines through Pfizer with the biotech vaccine, which one went through the FDA, and then also the Pfizer vaccine, totally different vaccine? Very nefarious of how this all took place.
Yeah.
And how everybody now just wants to move on when there's millions of people around the world, not to mention the country, that are injured or have died due to what happened throughout COVID and even after, as we're still, you and I, suffering with these injuries as the many people are around the world and the country.
Well, that's a great intro. Start off with, how do you make these things? How do you make these products? And there's a number of elements. Let's just put them in three categories. There's a liquid, it's probably saline, or something like Ringer's lactate, which is a surgical salt solution, which is just a way to mix all the components rather than a dry form. And also, there is a strand of messenger ribonucleic acid. And messenger RNA is the workhorse in the cell. It's the programming in the cell to make proteins. And it stays outside of the center of the cell, which is the nucleus, which is where the DNA is. The RNA is predominantly in what we call the cytoplasm, and it's what makes proteins. So the DNA code gets transferred to RNA, and RNA makes proteins. And the proteins are what maintain the body composition. So the way this is made, the original with the BNT product, which is the Pfizer product, was using a process called PCR, which is probably familiar because it was a way of testing for COVID at one point. And it stands for polymerase chain reaction. And it is a way to amplify and manufacture more RNA. And that's what they used in all the animal studies, version 8 and version 9. They actually looked at multiple products during the animal and the preclinical or the clinical studies. And the mRNA was made with this PCR process, which is a clean process, meaning they had a relatively pure form of messenger RNA, but it was not scalable. And this is important. They could not mass produce it in the quantities necessary to inoculate billions of people. So they went to a different kind of manufacturing, and they did this. This is critical. They made this change after they had finished the clinical trials. So all of the research was done on another product. And the final product, which is called Process 2, Process one is PCR, polymerase chain reaction. And process two is a plasmid bacterial DNA process. So what that means is you use a bacteria called Escherichia coli, which you have a nice beach behind you, and sometimes they'll close a beach because of sewage. And what they're doing is measuring E. coli. And E. coli is a very common laboratory organism, and it can be used to manufacture. You basically take the machinery of the bacteria and force it to make messenger RNA. So it's a totally different process. And in order to facilitate entry of that messenger RNA, they use this substance called the simian virus 40. Which is the SV40 promoter enhancer, which is a way to drive the mRNA into the cells, so it's a way to facilitate entry, but it's not necessary. And it's regarded at this point as a contaminant. And as you say, it's been identified in multiple laboratories around the world, multiple samples. So it's real, but it's just in the Pfizer. It's just not in the Moderna. And it's the SV40 that was in the polio vaccines back in, I think it was the Salk, which is what I had when in the 50s, produced some cancer. And so the question is, why would they do that? And then why wouldn't they tell anybody about it? The product should have been stopped right there. When people became aware that this process was not a clean process, it should have just been stopped, because the FDA is very fussy about making adjustments. If you make an adjustment in a product, you have to go through that whole series of testing. Well, they didn't do any of that. They just released it.
And just to even go deeper into this, they have full liability shield on the product.
Yes.
So they could come out and say that, as we've been talking about throughout this product, that the SV40 is in there, specifically. I believe it's somewhat out in some NIH documents now, as far as that's in that Pfizer biotech vaccine. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that's somewhat correct. You can, call me out on that. But I believe there is documents now through Freedom of Information Act that SV40 is in the vaccine for Pfizer now. And it's out there now. And they have that liability shield. So, again, people cannot sue. Whether it's Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca. I know there are people like Aaron Siri, as you've been talking about. We've talked to him multiple times as well, Doc, and he is trying his best to find the loopholes or find ways to help the injured, and he's been doing that throughout his life. But it is, again, almost impossible to put a lawsuit against any of these companies. I want to talk a little deeper about this, because we talked about this earlier on in the program when we were off air just shooting the BS back and forth, that Pfizer, I believe it had 30 microliters or whatever it may be.
Grams, micrograms.
Micrograms, yeah. Thank you. I'm not a doctor, as you are, docs. I don't know the correct terminology and all this stuff. That 30 micrograms of the vaccine, where Moderna, the one I received, has 100. And obviously, that's a huge difference between 30 and 100. Can we talk about the difference between 30 micrograms to 100 and giving it to somebody that's, 20s and 30s, that's healthy, and how it's affected them? Again, with me, it was neurological issues, still is, and my nervous system. But everybody has different issues, of course.
Yeah, the dosage is 3 times higher in the Moderna, and how you can approach that quantitatively, I don't know exactly, because there may be different products, so you're not exactly comparing just the dosage. There's a composition difference as well, and the whole product is different. going from one to the other.
True.
I haven't really studied the Moderna. I've spent 3 years working pretty much with BNT162b2, process 2, which is the Pfizer product, and know more about its composition, the specific nanoparticles, and some of the other composition elements to the Pfizer. And Moderna, there's 1 million pages of documents from Moderna. It's just a question of how much can you get through.
Yeah.
And individuals like myself working, we can spend thousands of hours and only cover so much territory. Just as an example, the protocols for the Pfizer study, the preclinical study, is over 1,000 pages. And there's 12 variations. So if you want to go through and look at all 12 variations in that 1,000 pages, you could probably spend a month or two going through that in detail. So you kind of have to pick out critical things.
Again, we're not offering medical advice here, but between us, obviously we both had adverse reactions. For someone, again, I got almost, well, triple of the dosage that you got, if we want to be truly honest. If someone like me, again, there's different ingredients, so it's kind of very tough to do this hypothetical. But if someone like me did get the Pfizer instead of the Moderna, obviously it's tit for tat. I would have the SV40 probably, whereas I don't now. But with that stated, would somebody with the lower dosage that's younger probably feel better than someone getting a higher dosage of the same stuff? Again, I know you're not God. You can't make, a true blue answer here. But as a doctor, as an assumption, as a person that studied this.
I think it's hard to make those cross-platform comparisons. Yeah, it's just they're different products, and they'll probably have a different profile of problems. And it looks like the Moderna is worse for myocarditis, and the Pfizer is more of a problem with the cancer, as you've pointed out.
So just to interject, the turbo cancer issue is mainly with Pfizer. Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's different mechanisms. You're talking specifically about the SV40. There's also the P53 system. P53 is a genetic sequence that acts to suppress cancer genes. And the cancer gene is called an oncogene. It's a set of code that's built into our DNA that can cause cancer. So we have those genes in our body. But there's another gene that suppresses those cancer genes, which is why you don't get cancer, because it's being suppressed. And that's the P53 system. If the P53 system is suppressed, then that allows those genes that can produce cancer to become active. So Moderna is not free of carcinogenic potential. It's just a different mechanism.
So the Pfizer and the Moderna are blocking the P53?
Well, I think they do. I'd have to refresh a little bit on that. And again, you've got a lot of differences. And some of the other variabilities, the administrative errors were massive, meaning storage problems, dosing problems at the injection sites. The products, I think, were adjusted once they were out in the market, and I can put out the evidence for that. So we're dealing with a moving target here to some extent. Plus, there is some individual susceptibility. There was a study published by Wrong, interesting name, Wrong et al., that looked at the genetic makeup of young males who got myocarditis, and they found there was a susceptibility to myocarditis. So we all have different susceptibilities to the same product, but when you have different products that are changing over time, then it gets to be a very complicated situation in trying to determine what your individual risk is.
I've talked to Dr. Robert Malone about this, and just to kind of go, and I know people listening might have their, likes or dislikes for these people. We're just talking strictly about information right now. And he stated that when I asked him, I said, listen, I said, do you believe that the vaccines will ever get pushed off the market? He said, as far as the Trump administration goes, there's no chance that's going to happen, whether Bobby Kennedy is in there or not. There's also no chance of that happening due to the president being, and again, I voted for the president, but the president is an egomaniac. He is a person that is very much on the Operation Warp Speed bandwagon. He is taking credit still for the vaccine and saving lives. He actually had people in the White House that are billionaires talking about new mRNA technology for a cancer vaccine. So, as a person that's injured like yourself, Doc, as well as I am, I think this is insanity still that we are still pushing these products. We're doubling down on these products to make them more available. And it seems like that they're just going to continually make vaccines, whether it's COVID, whether it's shingles, whether it's flu, the list goes on, with this mRNA technology in mind.
Yeah, I agree. It's disappointing to hear Bill Gates meeting with Trump for 3 hours and then talking about Warp Speed 2.0. Larry Ellison
Right.
talking about 500 million, billion, gazillion dollars to develop artificial intelligence to have specific mRNA products for Firebreathinrob and one for Dr. C. And down the line, you go, oh my gosh, stop the madness. And just to point out, this product's gone way too long with the damage it's done. It needs to be pulled now. Just to give you an idea, the thalidomide drug was used predominantly in Europe and the UK for sleeping medication for pregnant women, and it produced congenital anomalies, both internal as well as musculoskeletal. And that product ran for 5 years, and there were 10,000 cases, and about 40% of those were fatal because the congenital anomaly was an internal organ. Otherwise, a lot of the deformities ended up in the orthopedic arena because children were born without limbs or malformed limbs. So 10,000 cases got that off the market. We're talking about millions of cases of complications with these products. And we don't seem to be able to make much headway with governments.
Well, my question is again, and we know that Big Pharma has the money, whether it's on TV, whether it's with the politicians. We also know that DARPA was involved with this mRNA technology, with pushing the vaccines. Big Pharma was just kind of the pill pusher. DARPA was the big man on campus. They were the one that was,
Yeah.
paying and getting this under control. So it was really the government in general, the Defense Department, that was in
Right.
charge of the vaccine making it, and obviously Big Pharma was in charge of the distribution effort. So a lot of people don't speak about that and how Big Pharma and Big Tech are entwined together. Obviously, you just stated it with Larry Ellison with the mRNA technology, and people are seeing this. But again, the problem is, again, we both are voted for Trump. At least I can say I did. I feel like you did. I feel like we
Yes.
talked about this. Regardless of that, as many things the president does right, he does these things wrong. I don't know who's in his ear telling him that this is great. Down here in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis, he was trying to push, and he has a great Surgeon General, Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo, who has been pushing hard against getting the vaccine off the market. Even here in Florida, we can't seem to get that. The grand jury came. It said that these products were dangerous for young men and women. People shouldn't be taking it. They should be off the market. It seems like nothing's still happening. So I know that was a bit of a ramble, Doc, but it seems like the politicians, just to come to conclusion here, are bought off. Nothing, no change is really going to happen. We're talking about the food. Yes, the food is important, but it's not as important as what's going on with 1 in 36 kids getting autism. We never saw this. RFK Jr. talks about this consistently. When he was younger, there was never these kind of numbers. It was like 1 in 50,000 were getting autism. You don't see people that are 70 years old that have autism. What's happened? We know that the schedule in 1989 for the vaccine schedule changed from a very small amount to up to 72 childhood vaccines now. It's out of control. People see it, but I don't know really what people can do about it.
Yeah, and that's where I think we're not clear as to what this new administration's going to do. And we have kind of a mixed picture with Trump being pro warp speed and sounding like he's going to do more support of this platform. Whereas we know Bobby Kennedy's, I got a couple books he's written about how
Yeah.
problematic this stuff is. I doubt if Kennedy could get through what he's going through now if he was clear about being against vaccines,
Right.
whether it's specific or it's general. There's my view is there's more than enough evidence to yank the mRNA products right now, and last year and the year before. But let's say that's accomplished. What do you do next? Well, you do the kind of review that I've been doing and that the group I've worked with has been doing for 3 years. You just line them all up and you go through and you see what the process was to approve all these products and were they adequately tested. And it appears that none of them were adequately tested, at least to a point. I'm old enough that I went through all the childhood diseases without the benefit of vaccines, meaning measles, mumps, chickenpox, German measles, Epstein-Barr mononucleosis, you name it. It was just a rite of passage during childhood. Now they think they are controlling those all with vaccines. Well, it wasn't that big a deal. Polio is different. Polio was a real problem. But some of these others, I just don't know there's much need for a lot of these vaccines. And I know RSV and Novo virus are coming out, and let's stop. There's a lot of viruses we don't need to load up with fooling with our immune system for each and every virus that they can find. That's madness. And that's almost, I think that's really where we are because the children's schedule has 60 or 70 vaccines on it. It's ludicrous.
Well, our immunity level is going to get lower and lower, because, you keep locking people down. They're not getting in the environments. I mean, we saw that. That's why a lot of people were sick. Again, if these are so effective, why, all these people got it 70% of the country and people still died, people still got it. And that's the way it went. These was supposed to be foolproof that if you took it, you weren't supposed to get anything. 99% effectiveness. Then it was 90. Then it was 80, 70, 60, 40. I mean, what are we going to go down to? They're 0% effective. They don't do anything. Then it's, if you get it, you're going to have less chance of severe death. It's just all a lot of gobbledygook nonsense. And people were making money. And we saw Bill Gates made tons and tons, billions upon billions of dollars. And now he says that the vaccines are basically crap. Now he's looking into vaccines you shoot in your nose, the vaccines that you eat. So, all the people that don't want to take it, you're stuck because you're eating it anyway. I mean, it's just insanity. And, growing up, and I know you're older than me, Doc, and I'm sure obviously you never went through this, but I'll tell you, growing up, I don't remember all this vaccine talk. I mean, it's just out of control now. There's so much fear mongering, and it really started again in 2020 of January. That's when it started, and it slowly the catalyst came in, and then it's all the vaccine talk started. I mean, we're talking about the bird flu. I mean, give me a
Yeah.
break. I mean, it's just a joke. I mean, the bird flu thing is a joke. I mean, people shouldn't be getting a bird flu vaccine. I mean, you let it run its course. That's, the circle of life, to talk about a Disney movie with the Lion King. I mean,
Well,
it's the, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, well, the bird flu is, we, we run out of eggs in California
Yeah.
because we have two things going on. We have the bird flu, and they've slaughtered something like 100 million chickens in California. So we run out of eggs here now. But a second thing, a bill was passed in California that forced chickens to be happy. So we have to have happy chickens, meaning they have to have a certain amount of area to roam around.
Yeah.
My grandfather was a farmer in rural Arkansas. He had 10,000 chickens, and they were in one room.
Yeah.
So, so for him to adapt to a law like just passed in California a couple of years ago, he'd have to figure out how to get those chickens outdoors and not have them eaten by the foxes and the
Right.
eagles and the vultures that are around. So, yeah, some of these policies and rules are impacting negatively the food supply. So,
Well, and then, it's just crazy again. And maybe because I was very much in this liberal hysteria before the injury started. But now I see a lot of different things. We see about the fires where over in California. I don't think that really affected you because, or maybe it did. Um, I think you're in Northern California now, aren't
no,
you?
no, no, no. I sold my house in the burn area in March.
Wow. Wow, you just got out in time.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah,
and
no, between the fires, between the geoengineering, between
yeah.
all this stuff, the vaccines, everything is going crazy. And again, growing up, we never saw any of this stuff happen like it's happening now. And again, it's all about control. They don't want you to eat the steak because it's global warming, climate control, whatever the heck you want to call it. Or they're killing off all these birds. I'm sure they're getting eggs. Maybe you're not getting eggs because you're not in with the powers that be, but they're getting their eggs and they're cool with paying 10, 11, $12 for a dozen eggs. But it's going to kill you and I. But it's okay because they want the control. They want to bring us back to the Middle Ages, Doc. They
It
want
looks
the
like it.
serfs and the peasants, and they control you. And it's all about control. We saw this throughout COVID. I mean, if we want to keep going back, we could go back to 9/11 and the Patriot Act and what happened with that. I know this isn't a history lesson. I know this isn't a podcast on that. I do want to get your last word on that before we just quickly dive into the RFK Junior HHS hearings.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to point out, Rob, because the mRNA was latched upon by the scientists because they thought they could control the physiology of a cell. And cells are very complicated. If you've taken high school biology, you probably saw a spherical representation with a bunch of little things inside. Well, that's not anywhere close. It's a very exquisite, partially understood biologic machine. And for people who think they can reprogram it and end up with the result they desire, with the inputs and the control mechanisms they have and the knowledge they have, it's just foolish. It's just a hubris. And what we're seeing is all of these spectacular problems that form, I think, a unique complexion of diseases because the effects are so profound. And it's like you have this huge computer and you know a little bit of code and you want to change the code and you feed it in the computer and things start going crazy.
It
Uh,
sounds almost like a transhumanist agenda. Like
I
they
don't
want
know
to
what
live
it.
forever. and they are and they're trying to manipulate themselves. That's why there's all this AI, this robots, all this stuff, and they're going to use that to their advantage. Meanwhile, they want to make you a GMO, modified organism, and and they can control you, and then they want to put the chip in your body so they can control and see what your blood pressure is and what's in your body, and they can control the human body. So they really, I truly believe they want to play God, and this is the slow start of it. It's a slow walk into this transhumanist agenda where eventually they're going to put a chip in your body and they're going to know everything about you. And there's no going to be no doctor records. There might not even be any doctors. There might just be like, oh, you got a bellyache. We'll try to, or like anybody could give you a pill. And it's just insanity. And I don't think that's far fetched. I don't think that's too far away right now, Doc.
Well, this thing about control, you say, okay, you guys have the power, you have the control. How are you doing? How much carbon dioxide have you gotten out of the air? How many degrees have you lowered the planet? Versus how many whales have you killed off right off the behind you there out in the ocean, wherever they put in those windmills? We have deserts here that are just absolutely filled with these solar collectors and these windmills, and you just go, this is insane. How well are these control freaks succeeding with their little control steps that they've been taking? They're not doing very well. So it would be different if they were successful and useful and benefited humanity, but it just seems like it's going the other way.
Let's end with the RFK Jr. hearings. Obviously, between the Democrats and a few Republicans, they're talking was vaccine this, vaccine that, vaccine this, vaccine that. There has been a few Republicans that have been, targeting, the line and saying that RFK Jr. is doing a great job. He's, done all this and that in his life. But for the majority of Democrats, it's been a joke. And again, we have somebody like Bill Cassidy, who is the leader of the committee over there, and I believe it's it's not finance. I think it's health. He's the doctor from Louisiana, senator, and he's saying that he's undecided about voting for RFK Jr. We've seen this. We even saw Bernie Sanders, who I used to love and praise like he was Jesus Christ. We've seen Elizabeth Warren. These people are so supposed to be for the people, but they're out there, Doc, just spewing the big pharma line. And it's just insanity. So again, let me stop jibber jabbering and ask you the question: do you feel like RFK Jr. is going to get confirmed? And how much do you believe he can get done with Donald Trump, again, as you stated earlier on in our conversation, loving Operation Warp Speed, and he keeps praising it, of course.
Well, I remain optimistic, and I would say at this point, if they had a strategy to get rid of the platform, the mRNA platform, it's probably best not to show it at this point.
Right.
Because you don't know how many Republicans you would lose.
Well, he wasn't going to say that he's against any vaccines anyway, because he would have never got on there. Because again, as we stated throughout the conversation, the Republicans and the Democrat Party are bought off by Big Pharma. So that would be a total losing effort. So he has to play the middle, which he's been doing, talk a lot about food, diabetes, obesity, and you go that route. Maybe you sprinkle in a little bit of the vaccine talk, very little, and he's been playing the line very well. Go ahead, Doc.
Well, yes, and I would hope that when he gets in the office, when he gets confirmed, that he acts pretty quickly to get this platform off the market and to start studying people that have been vaccine harmed and start working on treatments in recognition that these are real diseases. They're different. Doctors are oftentimes baffled because the manifestations of these diseases are unusual. And I would be optimistic still at this point And I think if Kennedy does get in, that will happen, and then we'll start this process of going back in time and finding out which vaccines work and which ones don't. So I think it's too early to make that call. Some of the other people that he's appointed are a bit disappointing, like Dr. Oz, the
Yeah.
Surgeon General. And as a surgeon, I wonder why the Surgeon General is never a surgeon. They're ER doctors, they're anesthesiologists, God knows what they are. Let's get a surgeon in there. We're different. We're put together different than those other docs. And
Well, it's life
uh,
and death with you guys. Yeah.
yeah, we're not so mesmerized by the randomized double-blind studies, some of those things, because we've had to make progress. If you look at orthopedics from 1975 to 2000, you see total joints were developed, arthroscopy was developed, ligament reconstruction was developed, and you just go down the list, all without randomized double-blind trials. A lot of engineering, and we can test things in a material testing machine and other forms of testing, but having randomized trials just doesn't work in surgery. So we've had to make progress, which we have. I think the progress in orthopedics was massive without some of those tools. So we're down on the pyramid. In medicine, there's a pyramid of reliability in terms of research, where the top of the pyramid is the randomized double-blind study, and the bottom is my opinion based on whatever work I've done, and then everything in between. We've had to work on the bottom part of the pyramid to develop all those new techniques. So you don't need the top of the pyramid because it's absent. They got rid of it. In the COVID drugs, they stopped the randomized double-blind trial at 2 months. It was supposed to go for 2 years.
Yeah.
And essentially lost the opportunity to use the most powerful science to understand this product. And I think they did that deliberately. They're just hiding their crime. And I'm not a lawyer. I can't enumerate their crimes, but there's got to be a crime to do this kind of stuff. So yes, we need a big reconciliation. We need to, I was talking with another person that's heavily into this about trying to set up a conference where we get some publicity and we can bring people in. Doctors can be educated. And I think now that we have freedom of speech back, we have the tool to try to get to our colleague physicians and tell them what they may not know, or maybe they do know, and get them on board with the helping phase.
Again, if doctors were working for themselves like they used to, instead of working for hospitals and working for these companies, it would probably have been a different ball game back in 2021 when this came out. That's just my opinion. I think you believe the same as well, Doc, that this wouldn't have happened like it did. But unfortunately, the insurance companies, the companies that the doctors work for, they set the drawing board there. And when they come down and say, hey, listen, you got to push this, and they come out with these incentives like they were for Blue Cross and Blue Shield. If you give so many jabs, you get $100 a jab, or this and that. And
Yeah.
then those documents come out. It's really disgusting. And for somebody like me, or even for somebody that is outside of this, and maybe they don't believe that the jab is bad, if you see this documentation, I'm sure that you've been looking at, and also just like a document like that, Doc, you would say, what the heck did I just put in my arm? What's in
Right.
my arm when these doctors are making these big incentives of getting so many in my arm? And why do I have to take one every 6 months? I mean, it's really, and there are people still doing that. I think it's sad. And, again, we've talked about this before, that you just can't get to everybody. And there's people that are just pumping this stuff in, and they think they're listening to their doctor, and their doctor is Jesus Christ. And For the most people, their doctor is lying to them, and their doctor is making money off them, as far as with them keeping pumping this crap into their body. But it's
Well,
sad, but that's the way it goes.
let's go back and see what happened to physicians, because this, as you pointed out in your comment, uh, physicians might have changed this. So,
Yeah.
what happened to physicians? Their practices were closed. When you close a practice, your cash flow goes to zero. You're out of business. So they offered vaccines and money for vaccines for that purpose. But two very profound things happened. One was they didn't treat patients that got COVID as outpatients. They couldn't use ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, vitamin D, quercetin, all of the alternatives, which would have been the first choice. And all of those are benign products. There was no reason not to use them. And the doctors couldn't use them if they tried. The pharmacist would reject the prescription and maybe turn them into the hospital administrator. So you've got a group of people that's been weakened in terms of running their business. They've been ordered not to treat their sick patients, and they're unable to use alternative products. They were taken out. They were taken out. And it didn't matter if you were against them or for them. You couldn't exercise your free will. And when I spoke to some of the doctors I was seeing, I said, why don't you be like us rabble rousers in the 70s who closed the frickin' hospital down and get rid of the administrator? It worked the opposite. Largely because there was a group of physicians that were pro-vaccine. They were into the masks, all of those ridiculous measures. And so there was division in the physician group. So they couldn't work together against the oppression. So they were taken out, literally taken out, and made to be economically dependent on the hospital. And there's a long history there. And specifically with this disease, the first time I can think of, that doctors were ordered not to take care of their patients the way they wanted to. That's
The
profound.
Hippocratic Oath went right out the window.
That's right. It's gone.
And it's still gone,
It's
unfortunately. It
still
never
gone.
came back. So
But,
yeah, you're on your own, but go ahead.
well, don't give up on doctors, folks. Look, there's still a lot of good ones out there. So,
I agree.
yeah, and we need them. And I love for all the doctors to come online and take over the next million pages. And I'll go back to my grandkids and playing golf. It's just they got to show up first. I feel like I used to watch a lot of Dodger games from the press box, being one of the team physicians. And Tommy Lasorda had this left-right thing with his pitchers. And I was one game, it was going into extra innings. He ran out of pitchers. And I'm thinking you're going to start asking guys in the audience to come down and close out the game because he doesn't have any. Oh, he found a third baseman that could get the ball over the plate. So I think some of us, like myself, was happy in retirement that saw this need. I'm ready. I don't need this. I'm not making any money. I work 8, 10, 12 hours a day some days. Turn it over. There's a lot of experts. They just need to be liberated. And hopefully we'll see that. And there'll be more progress in getting these products off the market and the sufferers identified. And the other thing that's happening is there's a lot of effort to get documents into existence showing the damage that this stuff does, because we have a ton of information now. There's almost 3,400 scientific papers published on vaccine harms. I personally have about 30,000 pages of documentation in my garage. So we're ready to present this in the proper forum. But the proper forum is not the Senate hearings where you have these hyped up people having 3 minutes or 5 minutes. And how could that ever lead to anything intelligent in a complex topic like a vaccine? It's ludicrous. And it seems like the louder the people screamed, the higher the dollars were for the pharmacists or the pharma money that they were receiving. So Bernie and Liz and go down the list, and then you look at the contributions they're getting from pharma, they're just cheering their team on. It's crazy.
It's truly sad. And I'll tell you what, we are grateful at the program. We are grateful in general for people like you that are still fighting the good fight when you could have gave up a long time ago. And it's truly sad, again, that there's not more people in the fight. We do hope that, God willing, when Bobby Kennedy is, confirmed as the HHS secretary, along with Jay Bhattacharya and the rest of the gang there, hopefully some people will step up and fight the good fight and try to get a lot of these people, because there's, again, a lot of people suffering from long COVID. There's a lot of people injured and a lot of people that need help, and they don't have this kind of money. I'm talking to people, and we'll end on this. They're saying, "Oh, do the hyperbaric oxygen chamber. I mean, that's really expensive. Go and do red light therapy every day. For a machine, it's a good machine. It's it's 8, 9. I saw even $2,000 for a good machine. So I mean, this stuff all adds up. And then the pushing of the supplements. Don't even get me started with that. Again, there are some good supplements, but there's a lot of people pushing a lot of supplements at people, and they're making some money off the dole on that. That's another story for another day. But yeah, I'm hoping that, again, that when he gets in there, he's gonna, he knows what's going on, and even if it's a slight drip of, some help, people that are injured, people that have long COVID will take whatever they can get. So, Doc, last word as we call a close here.
Well, I would be optimistic for a turn. We were very close to a point where optimism probably would not have been possible. Had our California camel, as we call her, got put into place, we'd be still crying in our beer. So I think there's grounds to be very optimistic that I think another 6 months. And I don't know how to pick a time frame. I just think there's forces in motion that's going to change things. People are petitioning the FDA directly. I'm working on that now with James Roguski, who's got an incredible archive of documents. And I know there's a number of petitions before the FDA. There's a case I hope we could talk about in the coming weeks that is in another government that I've been working on, and we're at the district court level. And I think we're probably going to get beat, but it's like the Alamo. You get beat at the Alamo, and then you found the state of Texas. The Republic of Texas comes out of it. We've got enough documents entered into the record of this government that it's going to disturb somebody if they ever look at them. And so that's progress, because it was been very hard to get our documentation into the places where decisions are made. And I think that's beginning to happen here, Australia, UK, Germany's a little behind, but we're hoping. They've done some brilliant work in histopathology in Germany, I think, as we've talked on your show about. So I think I'd be optimistic at this point.
Doc, how can people find your work, the Pfizer papers, all that stuff? Just give us all that information as we close.
Yeah, I started a Substack 3 years ago. My gosh, 3 years ago. And it's you can go to Substack, which is a website, and just search for experimental gene therapy, or my name, Robert Chandler, no spaces, lowercase, .substack.com. Also have work on doctorsforcovidethics.com and dailyclout.io.
And the book is the Pfizer Papers is still on Amazon,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, there's two books. They're both 400 pages. Uh, and the first one is not in print form, but you can download it for $10 as a downloadable PDF or whatever the format is. The second book, which has a lot of the histopathology, which is documenting the damage done to tissues and organs, it's available on Amazon for $19.99 or something like that, $20. And it's hard to read these books cover to cover. It's not like a novel. We were trying to make them approachable, but you have to have an interest. You, for one, Rob,
Yeah.
I think you could deal with it. My advice is, if you got the $20, get the book. Someday it may be very valuable because it's the first textbook of COVID damage. And look at the pictures. I tried to use, in the things I wrote, I tried to use graphics to replace text,
Yeah.
because I think it's easier to understand a picture than read a lot of particularly jargon laden text. So I commend that to you. I think someday it'll be valuable because there are very few books of this type where it's all primary sourced. It all comes out of the Pfizer documents.
Yeah, I do hope people do the experimental gene therapy. That's the name of the Substack, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and go on there and subscribe to that. And you've been a very valuable research, Doc, in everything that you do, and always coming on here and fighting the good fight for people like you and I and the rest of the people around the world that are suffering with, again, long COVID or injury in general. So we hope you continue on. I know it's tough. I know you got your grandkids. I know you got a lot on your plate in general, and we hope you continue to fight the fight. And we'll always have you on here every so often to give
Yeah.
us an update.
One other source for people that like the videos like you're producing, if you go to Rumble
Yeah.
and you put in my name and just do a search on Rumble, you should come up with about 2 or 3 dozen videos of various things.
Yeah, and I know you've done Shannon a couple times, Shannon Joy,
Shannon, yeah.
and a couple other people obviously as well, and always great to have you on here and watch whether you're doing my show or anybody else's show, because there's always valuable information that we can always learn from and hopefully help us move forward. But again, Dr. Robert Chandler, thanks so much for your time tonight.
Next time, I'm going to have my beach in the background, like you have your beach, and we can go coast to coast.
Coast to coast, California to Florida. All right, Doc, thanks so
Take
much.
care.